So any part of that system is it's a fairly simple system, but it has some complexity built into it. Any part of the system failure in that part could mean that beautiful throne in that porcelain thing in your bathroom might not work the way you want it to be. So why is sanitation so important? Why are we discussing this? Well, in third world countries, and I talked about before in ancient history, the inability to deal with human waste causes disease and death. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of deaths around the world. It's not something that happens here much because we have a wonderful water system, waste system, but it does happen around the world. The kind of, unless you have superhuman powers, you're going to use that facility at least a couple of times a day. I was asking my wife, I said, let's track and see how much. She goes, oh, let's not. I tried to find out how many times the average person uses the bathroom in a day. I couldn't find that information. So I found something just as good. The average human being produces 2 pints of urine a day. And somewhere between 3/4 of a pound and 1.5 pounds of feces per day. So would you rather have known how many times rather than the actual number? I don't know. If you don't do something to get rid of it, let's say you for some reason can't or don't have facilities and you stop using the bathroom, you can get sick from that. You can become constipated, you can make yourself ill from not going. How many of you have ever lived in an area where the water has been shut off, the city or whomever says, the water's going to be off between 2 and 4, and you say, oh, that's not a problem, until that water goes off. The moment it goes off, you go, I want to drink the water. I'm going to have to go, well, I can't go to the bathroom. I have to wait until 4 o'clock to go. It puts a wrinkle in your day. So having that comfort station, as it were, it's an English term that I kind of like. When I was on my mission in Canada, they would refer to the bathrooms, public bathrooms, as comfort stations. I kind of like that term. If you can start having some psychological issues. If we've just survived an earthquake, is where going and how you're going to go to the bathroom and where you're going to go to the bathroom going to be a major cause for concern in your life? It certainly could be, and it's certainly something you probably don't want to have as having that thought process while having to deal with an earthquake as well. What kind of things can happen to you if we don't use a proper sanitation device? Human waste is filled with parasitic eggs, cysts, bacteria, and many pathogens. Some of those pathogens can travel up to 300 feet all by themselves. I didn't realize that until I started studying this about making outhouses and things. They always say place them at least 300 feet away from dwellings. The reason is some of those pathogens can travel airborne or in other ways all by their lonesome. Not very pleasant. The main things that we can get from being around unsanitary conditions, cholera, diarrhea, hepatitis, those kinds of infections are carried in human waste. And so we want to make sure that we have some facilities for getting rid of them and dealing with them. Well, we're actually going to get to my favorite question is, well, can't I just dig a hole? Can't I go in my backyard and just dig my own latrine? They do it in the Army all the time. Why can't I just do that? Well, there's several reasons why it might not be a really good idea. Having a latrine in your backyard is a serious health hazard, and as such is covered under several health codes, in this California State Health Code, as well as the health codes of most other cities and counties. If yours is discovered, and they're hard to hide, people will smell them, you may be forced, at gunpoint, to leave your home. Your home is otherwise okay, except you've dug a latrine in your backyard. They may come and ask you to leave. Now, why do I say at gunpoint? Well, because policemen ask you nicely the first time, and the National Guard might ask you nicely the first time, but eventually they're going to make you move. They will red tag your house, and they will make you move. During the Northridge earthquakes, we volunteered and went up to Northridge and had given the assignment to go house to house, distributing information, telling them where the FEMA sites were, and those kind of things. I was given a nice orange hat, and any of you who have been in some of my lectures, I usually bring out that hat and talk about it. But one of the things that happened to me was I came around a corner about a block south. You know that apartment complex collapsed one floor on top of the other? Literally 1 block south of that, and there's an apartment complex that was almost exactly the same. 2-story apartment complex above a carport. The entire structure of the carport was compromised. So everybody who lived in that apartment structure had to leave, and they were living in a field behind their apartment with all of their belongings. They had drugged them out. There were no facilities there. Somebody had drug over a porta potty, one of the from a construction site, but that had been overfilled about 2 days before. And so they came there and they told those people who were there they had to leave. The situation was unsanitary. They couldn't care for them. This being the National Guard, and they were telling all these people that they had to leave. They didn't want to go to the FEMA camp that was set up for them because they were not allowed to take most or all of their possessions with them, and they were afraid that they were going to lose them. And so they were being physically removed by National Guard troops out of that area because of the unsafe conditions. So if you want to stay in your home after a disaster, building a latrine in your backyard might not be the best idea, because they certainly could come and red tag your house and force you to leave your home, even though there's nothing else wrong with your home other than the inherent sanitation issues. Part of the problem we would have around here with digging a latrine or some type of thing in your backyard is that we have a condition of this area in most of Orange County is a floodplain for the Santa Ana River. Therefore, our soil is really very sandy, which is really nice if you're trying to dig a hole and plant flowers. It's pretty easy to tear up the soil. The bad news is the sand you pour water in, it goes right down. The water table here is only about 35 feet deep. And so if you were to dig a latrine for more than 2, 3, 4 feet deep, you would have water seepage coming in. So anything that would go into the latrine would certainly enter into the water supply. And that would not be good for you or anywhere else, because the water that we drink comes from that same aquifer. And so, so that would be a problem. The other problem, as I told you before, you need to have a latrine about 300 feet away from any dwelling. I don't know about you, I don't own that much property. There's no place on my property that I can get 300 feet away from my house or anybody else's house. And I would imagine neither can any of you. We live in Southern California. We're all pretty much dense housing, so that you can't get more than about 50 or so feet away from your house or anybody else's house. That's far short of the 300 feet that would be required to be able to dig a latrine. Then you'd have to worry about ventilation. Remember I told you that they would discover it pretty quickly? That's because the smell would start to happen. The only way that you can do that is by building something that would house the latrine and be able to ventilate it properly. This is doable. In fact, if you go on the internet, there are lots of places that you can go and get plans to make your own latrine in your backyard. The problem is you still go back to that 300-foot rule and the water table rule that you have.